Okay, so furling started out, I'm pretty sure, in the fly fishing sector, partly due to the fact that the saltwater area used furling for creating tapered leaders, that helped with the turnover of tippets. And so you could furl and then build a tapered leader to a tippet for salt water, which held all sorts of benefits apart from the turnover of the leader off the back end of the fly line. Furling's found its way into other places, and now I think that I had a look at furling, and I think it was Rod Harrison was making knotted dogs, which was a great thing. This all come about that braid's got no stretch, and that when braid was released, we were finding our way, new technology, and as usual, we're always innovating and always trying to improve our fishing and outcomes, etc. It went through a phase where guys had drills, and they're creating these big twisted leaders for everything, because we all had quite sort of stiff rods and very stretchy nylon, and then we came along, we had braid, and then we're looking for shock absorbers for a whole range of verticals in recreational angling, from game fishing to sport fishing to fly fishing, and this great transition that we've been in with braid technology that's arrived, that's been around, I don't know, at a guess 20 years now. So what I'm going to do is just going to furl a leader, and what I thought about and come across years ago is that on a barramundi trip, we're fishing a leader, and like I was saying before, some of the challenges we have is that our braid is so fine that the leader that's required to resist a fish. An example might be a barramundi where they've got the gill rakers and gill plates, etc., which hit on the immediate sort of, 6 inches of leader. But what you can do with a furl is you can reduce the main. So if you're fishing, say you're fishing a 10 kilo braid in a, Barra Classic or something, then your leader can be, say, 20 kilo leader, but you can furl the top 6 inches of leader, which will protect that leader from the gill rakers, but you've still got lower diameter going back to the main line. So in essence, you're building a form of tapered leader, but there's so many other uses for furling. If you're trolling, you can build a furled leader, reverse it around, and then you're trolling along, and a mackerel or another pelagic hits the lure. The furling acts as a shock absorber, so it puts extra stretch in for practices like trolling. So the furl can be at the lure end when you're fishing for barramundi and you're worried about gill rakers. But then when you're trolling, you can cat's paw a swivel into the other end, and have the furl at the braid end rather than at the lure end, and have it much longer. You can build out a furl to a foot long or 2 feet long, and that will absorb the impact of a mackerel or something hitting your troll braid line. And also when they're jumping, if you've got a sailfish, that sort of thing, and you're using a furled leader, what you're doing is you're building in a shock absorber which will keep the hook set. It will absorb the impacts of pelagics when they're jumping. etc. So what happens is, you know, people have changed tactics, and this is the great thing about fishing is, you know, it's the innovation and working out new ways of better angling. And, you know, people will fish a softer drag with braid to allow for the impact. But if you've got a furled leader, you can sort of bring the trolling drag setting up a little bit, because the furled leader will impact it will absorb the impact of a pelagic smashing that lure when you've, you know, when you've got it trolling behind the boat. So what I'm going to do is I'm looking through my phone doing this. So what you're seeing is much smaller, is much bigger than what I can see. So to start off a furl, what you do is you just cross over the line and bring it up into your fingers. Right, I'll just do it that way. Bring it up and tight. See if I can do it this way. Yeah, I haven't. Let's see. Right. So what you do is you just get it started. Right, I'll start the other way. Just get it started, and you're sort of pinching, and you're controlling that in your fingers, and so you're spinning it. What I'm doing is my left hand here is letting off a little bit and then biting down as I stop, and you're twisting that line in your, this is 10 kilo. You know, I probably should have done it in 24 kilo. But you can see how I'm just spinning that out. Once you get started, your furls get really tight. Right. So you can see I'm spinning it up. No drills, no cordless drills, although I should have cut the other end off because it's copping the twist. So you've got there, you've got this, now you've got this twisted leader. Rod Harrison called them knotted dogs. He had, his were slightly different again, but you've got this thing which will now, you've got twice the diameter in 6 inches, which is going to absorb impact when you're barramundi jumping, but it's also going to resist against the gill rakers biting into the leader, and you can still have the main section of the leader much finer to the braid, which is great when you're casting because, you know, I've done a lot of fishing, but I went to some atolls, etc., and I had leaders and thought, well, I'm going to need hefty leaders. Made these 200-pound wind-ons, which I might do some wind-ons in another video. But the 200-pound wind-ons were impeding my ability to cast to GTs at some distance off the back of the atoll. And so I wasn't getting the distance I needed to get to the fish. And I needed to back down to, say, 130 or even 100-pound leader so that the leader would go through the guides. They're big guides, all suited to what I was doing. But, you know, once you start getting up into big leaders, you lose distance. And if you're not getting the distance with the poppers, etc., then you're not getting the fish. You've got other anglers that are fishing 100 pound. They're stuck in another situation. They're getting the distance hooking the fish, but they're getting busted off on the coral because the leader's not hefty enough for them to be able to get the fish out of the cracks in the atoll. So what you can do is, if you're in that situation, is you might have, you might fish, say, 100 pound or 80 pound leader on 80 pound braid, something like that. And then you can furl up whatever distance you want and lock it off. So what I do is I do this, I just form a loop like that, and then I'll come through a couple of times and I'll just go through there like 3 times to finish off at the other end. You'll get the loop on the end, you'll get that tighter as well. This is just one, I haven't done one for a little while, but I thought I'd just do this because these things suit certain styles of fishing, and I haven't had that need yet. Locks are good, and then pull her up. Right. So there you have it. And just snip off the tag end. So what you've got there is now you have this filled tip on the end of your leader. So when you're casting, you can have your main leader at a lot less diameter and be able to cast further. Yet the working end, the crux of the working end of the leader is actually protected. You got double the diameter, and you're protecting from gill rakers, coral, you know, all the real working end, and the part of the section of the leader that cops it is actually double the thickness, and it's got the stretchy bit in it. So I'll just do this. So when I get this and I pull on it, you'll notice even though it's sort of only 6 inches long, I've actually got a lot of stretch in that. You know, you can see it recoiling. Right, and you can put a swivel on this end if you're trolling. Right, make this a bit longer. You can cat's paw a swivel on, and you can use this at the other end, opposite end. So this can be your braid connection. You can do it however you want. You can, because it's a loop connection, you can do an Albright, whatever you want to do, you know, because it's a loop connection. Right, so I'll just pull this up here. So this end, then what happens is this end ends up being the braid to leader connection as well. And you have this, say, a foot long, and then when you're trolling and the lure gets belted, you've got that shock absorber in the knotted. You can do it both ends. You know, you can have both ends. If you could have this end here and then the other end, you can have that furled as well. So that and that was the principle of Harrison's knotted dogs, was when you're catching barramundi, and that, you know, when the fish jump, you're getting shock absorbed because braid doesn't have any stretch. Stuff like material like fluorocarbon doesn't have a lot of stretch either. It has less stretch. Fluorocarbon's finer in diameter and has lower light refraction. It's harder. So, you know, when the fish are a little bit finicky in clear water, fluorocarbon really comes into its own. So this sort of mitigates some of those properties. And where you don't have stretch, knots explode. So if you build in a furl, what you're doing is you're mitigating the knot exploding, because that actual impact of where fish are waving heads in air and the impact of pelagics hitting trolled lures means that the furling will impact the shock, which saves you from your knots exploding. And you really sort of notice that when fluorocarbon first come out. I really noticed that it was a combination of burning and the absolute no stretch in the line. Is the knots just explode because there's no stretch to absorb the inertia in the impact of anything. So that's furling. You might want to give it a go. You saw what I did, and you don't need cordless drills, etc. You can just spin them in your hands, and the more you practice, the better you get at furling. And what you'll find is you'll come into situations where that really suits you, and you'll end up using them for trolling leaders and for fishing for barramundi when you're casting lures where, you know, you're mitigating impact and abrasion for gill rakers at that end, where there's not, you know, especially if there's not a lot of other obstacles around that are going to abrade your leader. You can cut down on your leader diameter, and then, you know, you're not going to get busted off by gill rakers on a leader and worry about those sharp bits that are on the fish. And that's furling. Thank you very much for watching.